early, since we are in a very special week, because today's week we are actually concluding the second of the 5 books of Moshe. Remember a couple months ago when we finished the entire Torah, we celebrated a holiday called Simchas Torah, and then we started reading again. We went through the book of Bereshit, and believe it or not, we are already holding by the completion of Shmot, which means the time is not going, but time is flying. This week we are going to have a double Parsha in order to complete Shmot, and especially because there's going to be a Shabbat soon of Passover that we are not going to learn the weekly Parsha, we are going to read about Pesach, but to make sure that by the holidays we are all on the same page, so sometimes 2 portions are being combined. The Parsha of this week is very interesting because really there's almost no insight or no new information other than the fact that whatever Moses was told by God in regard to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, is in this week's Parsha, Moshe gathering the entire congregation of Israel, and he shares with them that what God asked him to say to them. But instead of just saying in the Torah that Moses told the Jewish people whatever God asked them to tell them, instead the Torah does repeat again with details, with much detail, exactly what was he told and what was he asked. So we are going to learn this week again regarding the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which ultimately it became the temple. And then we are going to have an accounting of all the gold and silver and copper, everything which was collected, and share it with everybody. What came in for the vessels of the temple, what was used for the garments of the priest. And the Parsha will conclude that it was at the first day of the first month when the Mishkan was actually finally erected by Moshe, which means the Mishkan was built right after Yom Kippur, when they were told to make me a sanctuary. It took them about 2 months to build it, and then it was kept, according to many commentaries, at the tent of Moshe. And then the week before the new month of Nisan is when the Kohanim were getting their first training into making the Mishkan. And finally, it was the first day of the new month, which is the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is actually going to be this coming week on Thursday, is going to be the new month of Nisan, the month of the Exodus, the month of the miracles. That's why this Shabbat we are going to bless the new month of Nisan. So it was the first day of Nisan when the Mishkan was the first time established, exactly in the year 2447 years from creation. 49 years, from creation. They left Egypt 2,448 years from creation, Taf Memchet, and the following year, the month of Nisan. Here, you can never see it right here. You have a chumash.
Oh, sorry.
Make yourself at home, Mr. Bergen. It was Taf Memtet is when they actually erected the Mishkan, which stood and served them in the desert, and then was reestablished in the land of Israel 39 years later, first in a place called Gilgal, eventually Nov, then in Giv'on, and then for 369 years, it was standing in a place called Shilah, and then King Solomon took it from there to the temple established at Jerusalem. King David purchased the property, but King Solomon was the one building it in Jerusalem, which became the permanent home for God for the first temple 410 years, and then 70 years later, the second temple 420 years. And we are looking forward for the ultimate and final temple being built by Moshiach, as the Rambam rules. So what I'm going to do tonight, we are going to discuss the architects of the Mishkan. The architects which are being mentioned this week, this is the main figures in building the Mishkan. There is actually in Israel till today, there is a school of art called Betzalel. And Betzalel is the name of the school, which is named after the first for the building of the Mishkan. So Betzalel we already met last week. Those who have a Chumash, you can go back to last week's Parsha and chapter 31, verse 1 till verse 11 is when God tells Moshe, if you want to take a look, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Leimar, Hashem speaks to Moshe saying, Re'ei. Re'ei means in Hebrew, see. Karati Beshem. I have called by a name, Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur, Lemate Yehuda. Betzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, and he is from the tribe of Yehuda. Just for those who are here first in class, those who are learning and know it for sure, that who was Hur? Hur, the grandfather of Betzalel, was the son of Miriam. Miriam was the sister of Moshe and Aaron. She had a son, which his name was Hur. Hur, unfortunately, his life was taken. He was assassinated when he stood up to demonstrate against the people who were creating and worshiping the golden calf. Rashi brings it in the Parsha. So this Hur, the son of Miriam, actually got killed by the people there who service to worship the golden calf. But he had a grandson. And as the Medrash says, that God rewarded Hur for his act of self-sacrifice on behalf of his name, that he was rewarded that his grandson, Betzalel, should be the one in charge on the work to build the Mishkan. The Torah says there in verse 3, ruach Elokim, God says, I have filled them with a godly spirit, b'chachma, b'tvuna, b'das, with wisdom, with insight, with knowledge, u'bechol melacha, and with every craft. So he was a very knowledgeable person, a very profound craftsman, lachshov machshavot, to wave designs, la'asod bekesef, bazov, bakesef, ubanechoshet, to work with gold, with silver, and copper. Ubacharoshet even lemalot. He knew how to also do stone cutting. And he also knew how to do charoshet etz, to do wood cutting. La'asod bekol melacha. For example, at the breastplate that the Kohen was wearing, he had to cut the diamonds which carried the names of each tribe. So he knew exactly how to cut gems and fill them properly in the proper design of the breastplate. So this is the story of Betzalel. Together with Betzalel, God says there is going to be another person working along with him. V'anine natati ito, and behold, I have assigned with him an individual, a young man with the name of Oholiav ben Achisamach lematei Dan, from the tribe of Dan. We will discuss him soon. He was the second person in charge together with Betzalel. Ubelef kol chacham lev natati chokhmah. Hashem tells Moshe that I have also endowed the heart of every wise-hearted person with wisdom. Ve'asu et kol asher tziviticha, and they are going to perform everything that I told you. This was said last week in Parshat Kisisa. It came in our week's Parsha, Parshat Vayakhel. Moshe is telling the Jewish people that God had appointed Bezalel of being in charge. He shares with them the information. You look it up, you find it on chapter 35, verse 30. Here is Moshe speaking to the children of Israel. Before it was God speaking to Moshe. Now Moshe is relating the information, chapter 35, verse 30. Vayomer Moshe bnei Israel, Re'u, I want you to see, Kara Hashem b'Shem, Betzalel, ben Uri, ben Hur, lemata Yehuda, and he shares basically almost the same information which he was told. We come later in the next Parsha, which is Parsha Pekudei, which is chapter 38, verse 22. Now we are talking about the actual work of the Mishkan. So again, the Torah begins. Ubetzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemate Yehuda asa et kol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. He actually did that what God told Moshe, be'ito, and together with them, Oholiav ben Achisamach lemate Dan, from the tribe of Dan. This is the verses in the Torah. One of the famous commentators known as the Rabban, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman, known as Nachmanides, he points out something very interesting about the Tzal. First of all, he begins by saying that the Torah begins both in Parshat Kitisa, when God speaks to Moshe, and in Parshat Vayakhel, when Moshe speaks to the Jewish people. The way they introduce Bezalel is by using the term Re'u, see. God says, Re'u, Ro'o Korati, see that I called Bezalel. Moshe tells the Jewish people, Re'u, see Karati. What is the idea of seeing? Usually when you want to speak to someone, relay the message, you say see or you say hear. Hear, Shim'u, hear what I'm relating to you. Yet when it comes to Bezalel, the Torah introduces it with a term of, I want you to see. What is there to see other than hearing? You know what the Ramban says? Ramban says, Nachmanides writes that God tells Moshe, I want you to see a very unusual phenomenon in this personality called Bezalel. What is the unusual phenomenon? Explains Nachmanides. People who were enslaved in Egypt till a few months ago, and all their life they were working with mortar and brick. They never saw gold, silver, copper. They were always busy to be working hard for Pharaoh. They were slaves. And the hands which are being immersed in that type of work of building towers for Pharaoh, the hands which work with mortar and bricks are not the hands which can handle naturally silver, gold. The craft deserves a much delicate hand. This is not a rough mix of mud in order to build towers and structures. This is a delicate, very sophisticated type of work. And yet, to have people who just walked out of Egypt and already carrying with them that value, that ability to work delicately with gold, with silver, with copper, this is a miracle. This deserves to pay attention to. So this, he says, the Ramban is what Hashem tells Moshe, Re'ei, I want you to see, I want you to pay attention, to pay heed to what this unusual phenomenon is in front of you, introduced by this individual called Betzalel. Matter of fact, even among the delicate jewelry and diamond dealers, you have one who is trained with gold, somebody else with silver, third guy with copper. But to have one individual which can be, and he is perfect in gold, with silver, with copper, with cutting stones, with cutting wood, everything, alles, everything, to be able to have this ability to work with everything which exists in a manner of art. We're not talking about, banging walls. Art, true art, measures, exact measurements, the way we see it in the Parsha. Everything has its measurement, how many cubits, how high, how big, how wide. This is unusual. Ramban calls it Pele. He calls it Pele. He says this is a surprising, wondrous, unusual existence which God tells Moshe, Re'ei, I want you to pay attention to it. You got to see it. Matter of fact, Betzalel was not only familiar, and he wasn't only trained, and he wasn't only an expert in the practicalities of the Mishkan. Betzalel had also the spiritual insight to be able to figure out every tool and every vessel of the Mishkan to which spiritual dimension, to which spiritual sphera, to which spiritual concept is it going to be associated with, so that vessel should be able to be a proper recipient to that spiritual aspect associated with that vessel. When I asked them.
In Parsha, didn't Hashem also empower in him wisdom?
Exactly, that's what it says.
So information be
that exactly is that's the godly spirit that he was blessed with. This is all a part of this deal. To the point that the Talmud actually says there was a discussion between Moshe and Betzalel, to which Moshe wanting to build the vessels before the tabernacle, and Betzalel said to him, I don't think that's the plan. You probably mean to do the vessels later. First you have a home, and then you're going to be able to store them. And to which Moshe says, you know what? Were you at heaven? Because it seems like you know the information, and now you're reminding me that God actually did tell me first the tabernacle and then these vessels. And the Talmud says a very, very unusual expression about anybody. The word of the Talmud in Brachot is, Yodea Betzalel haya letzaref et haotiyot shebaem nivreu shamayim va'aretz. Betzalel had the insight to be able to combine and to organize the words and letters that God used to create heaven and earth. Because as we know from the beginning of Bereshit, the world was created by words, by speech, by letters. By Yomer Elokim, by Yedaber Elokim, Hashem said, Hashem spoke. To know that wisdom, Abacadabra, to say things and things happen, right? You ever heard the term abracadabra? You know what abracadabra means?
Do as I say.
Huh?
Abracadabra.
Abracadabra.
Create as I
Abra, create, kedabra, like I speak, which is actually the concept of the way God created the world, abracadabra. And yet, to know that wisdom and to have that knowledge, this was the power of Bezalel, to the point that the Talmud comments that even his very name, Bezalel, comes from the Hebrew two words, Betzel Kel. He was in the shadow of God, keeping in mind that he is all fully spirited with godly divine inspiration to build the Mishkan. So the Mishkan was not just an external structure of a building with items. In every part of the Mishkan, there is inner dimensions, inner meaning. And says the Ramban, this is what Hashem tells Moshe, Re'ei, she'ireh pele hazeh. I want you to see this wonder, and you should know that Bezalel was already, before creation, was already destined to be that individual. He quotes the verse in Jeremiah, that I knew you before you came into your mother's womb, and I sanctified you before you left your mother's womb. From the beginning of creation, the holy great soul of Bezalel was prepared to the moment when the godly commandment is going to come to build the Mishkan. By the way, Bezalel was a very young man. The Talmud calculates Bezalel's life by stating that Bezalel was just turning bar mitzvah. He was a 13-year-old young man when he was building the Mishkan. He had to be bar mitzvah. So some halachic commentators say that the reason he had to be bar mitzvah has to do with a very interesting halachic principle, which says, Uman koneh b'shevach kli, which means that a craftsman, when he takes raw material, imagine you own raw material, and you give it to a craftsman to craft it for you. The fact that he is improving that material gives the craftsman some type of ownership over that material. And that's what the owner of the material pays him to release it from his ownership. So some halachic commentators say that Bezalel, obviously taking materials and building a Mishkan, is also at some level acquired by improving this material. He has kind of an ownership to it. And then obviously he has to grant it to the community, which is who to the Mishkan belongs to. Yet if you perform a mitzvah, you can't really grant something in a legal way that it should belong to the people that you give it to. That's another reason why you had to be bar mitzvah. According to other commentators, he would have never acquired that improvement of the material since it was a gift by God. It wasn't his own acquired wisdom. Like the verse says, Va'amaleoto. He was filled with godly wisdom. Maybe even he forgot it afterwards. It was for that moment. It was given to that point. But either way, this is the idea of Re'ei. There's also what the Medrash says, when it says Re'ei Karati, Hashem called Moshe, says the Medrash, and he showed him a book. Which book did he show them? Says the Medrash that when Moshe came up to the mountain and God said, here, I want you to make me a Mishkan. And like it says in the verse, everything that was made was shown by God exactly how to make it, right? That's why it says, do it like I showed you in the mountain, like I showed you on the mountain. The verse keeps on repeating, Kasher ereta ba'ar, as you were shown in the mountain. But the Medrash says that Moshe turned to God, and he was assuming that I'm going to be the one performing it. You asked me to do it, I'm going to do it. And God told Moshe, listen, I appointed you as the king of the Jewish people. And our king is not getting personally involved in working with raw materials and construction. This is not for you. And therefore, I want you to appoint others to do it for them. You're going to tell them what to do, and they are going to do. But God never told them to whom you should say it. So Moses turned to God and he says, God, there's a lot of people down there. Anyone specific that you want me to ask them to do it? Says the Medrash, God came and he opened a book. There was a book in heaven called the Book of Adam. And that book contains in it the information of all future generations, who is going to be what, who is going to be a rebel, who is going to be a leader, who is going to be the head of the gangsters, who is going to be the head of the Hasidim, who is going to be the head of the Misnagdim, and who is going to be the head craftsman. Every leader of the generation is already included in that book. Just in parentheses, they say a story about the Hasidic master Reb Zusha of Anipoli. He was the brother of Rebbe Elimelech of Lizhensk, which actually today was his yard site. They say that Reb Zusha was a rebbe in a small little shtetl called Anipoli. I was actually there. It's all the way at the end west of Ukraine by Poland. Really small place. And Reb Zusha was a very humble man. And they say that there was a ditch, like a very muddy ditch in Anipoli, which seemed never to dry, even in the summer. It kept on being a wet blotter, a wet type of mud. And Reb Zusha once commented and he said, you know, with this mud, the undried mud, the ditch, you know where it comes from? Reb Zusha said, let me tell you. It says in the Medrash that when God created the world, he wrote a book presenting to Adam, which has every generation who is going to be the leaders and who's going to be the great individuals. And then it came to a point, they finally arrived to the city of Anipoli, 1700s. And God says, here in Anipoli, Reb Zusha is going to be the Rebbe. So Adam went and he gave a speech, Zusha, also a Rebbe. And that speech stayed as a ditch till today, never dried out. This is the story of the blotter in Anipoli. Anyway, close the parenthesis. The point is that Adam was shown, in the book of Adam, Moses was shown who is going to be the architect of that Mishkan, and that this is going to be Bezalel, says the Medrash, and that's why it says Re'u, see. The Abarbanel, for example, who was also a great Sephardic commentator, one who was from the leaders of the Jewish community in Spain during the expulsion, the Inquisition time. He was the treasurer, actually, at the Spanish royal palace. And he has a commentary, and we have his volumes of Abarbanel over here in the library, some of them. So the Abarbanel writes that the Re'u is not just the idea come see. It's more like making a very strong, profound statement. God says, listen, Re'u, I want you to see, this is the fact. What's the fact? The fact is that I am choosing Bezalel as the person. It might be a discussion, and I do want people should discuss and agree. I'm not going to, impose it on them. But at the same time, you should know that even after he's going to be chosen by the people, others, I'm sure, are going to get up there and say, it's all in the family. What do they call it? Nepotism. First is the Rebbe. His brother becomes the Kohen. And now his wife's family, Bezalel, is becoming in charge. The architect is becoming the artist. That's called nepotism, right? Mishpucha. Mishpacha. God says, Don't take it from them. I am the one who called Bezalel. I was the one who made Bezalel in charge. I said, and this is what actually it says in the Medrash. Medrash Tanchuma says, when Moshe came down the mountain, he told the Jewish people, Hashem told me to make a mishkan, an altar, a table. And they said, who is going to do it? He said, Bezalel. The Medrash actually says, in the Medrash Tanchuma, they all started saying, hey, Moshe, Hashem never told you to use Bezalel. You're using him because it's your sister. We're trying to take care of your sister's family, the Zayda, whatever. Moshe says, no, nothing was initiated by me. This is not like everything in the Mishkan is directed by God. So too, to have Bezalel in charge is all directly by Hashem. And this is what Re'u means. I want you to see that it's coming from God. But here we have another reason for Bezalel, which I mentioned earlier. Bezalel, the Torah mentions, whenever the name Bezalel is mentioned, he is not only mentioned together with his father's name, but is also mentioned with his grandfather's name. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, which is very unusual in the Torah, especially if you see his own partner, Eliav. It says, Eliav ben Achisamach. His father's name was Achisamach. It doesn't say who the grandfather was. So the Medrash actually points out this question by saying, why is it that Bezalel has his grandfather mentioned and how comes Eliav does not have his grandfather mentioned? The Medrash says that when it came, which I mentioned earlier, when it came to the golden calf, Bezalel self-sacrificed his life for the sake of God. He stood up and he demonstrated against the worshipping of the golden calf, and he was killed. I'm sorry, his grandfather Hur. And Hashem says, as the Medrash says, the Medrash compares it to a king. For Bezalel, have to give him something. And he, for Hur. And the decision was that Hur's grandson is going to build the Mishkan. So basically, the Mishkan was given to Bezalel because he carried the values of his grandfather's Mesirut Nefesh, the self-sacrifice for the sake of God. And when it comes to build a Mishkan, you need somebody who he carries in his DNA the self-sacrifice in order to make it happen. You know, it's going to involve money. It's going to involve community. Everyone's going to have what to say. People are going to tell you, you don't need it. It's too much. You're spending. You're not spending. You're cheap. You're miser. You're too gifted. You're giving too much. You need someone to stand up there with a Zayda like Hur and said, hello, whatever I'm doing is by divine intervention. Let me continue doing it, and you're all going to enjoy it in the end. It's not only his grandfather Hur. Don't forget about Bobby Miriam. His grandmother Miriam gave her life up to take care of little babies in Egypt. And God promised her that I'm going to build you homes of Kehuna, of Leviah, homes of priesthood. Aaron became the priest, Moshe the Levi, and she built the home of the Bezalels, of the artists. It was rewarded. She gave her life up to protect Moshe. Without Miriam, we would never have a Moshe. Matter of fact, he was from the tribe of Yehuda. Yehuda is all standing for self-sacrifice. The leader of the Yehuda tribe was Nachshon, the son of Aminadab, who jumped into the sea, caused it to split. While the Egyptians were behind, everybody was screaming, not knowing what to do. what's it called? Of Bezalel. This is where he came from. So it's not only that he came from special yiches or special lineage. It was that special lineage which gave him the ability and gave him the strength to be the one to do what needs to be done in order to build the Mishkan properly. Matter of fact, it's interesting that if you look in our Parsha, everybody is wondering when it comes in even Rashi in chapter 37, verse 1, when they're starting to build the Mishkan. So the first verse reads, Vayas Betzalel et Aaron. And Betzalel made the ark. His name is mentioned as if he's the one who made it. Verse 10, it says, Vayas et Shulchan, and he made the table. It doesn't say, and Betzalel made the table. On verse 17, Vayas et menorah, and he made the menorah. It doesn't say that Betzalel made it. But when it comes to the ark, it says clearly that Betzalel is the one who made it. And Rashi says, why is his name mentioned since it wasn't Betzalel alone who made it? Yes, he was the chief artist and the chief architect, but there were other Chachmei Lev, there were wise people who helped him alongside in making the Mishkan. So why is his name mentioned and others are not? Says Rashi from the Medrash, Lefi shenatan nafsho ala melacha yoter mishar hachachamim. He gave his life for the work, more than all wise people. Meaning all wise people gave away something to work, but he literally gave his life for it. And when you give your life for it, then is when you deserve that whatever is being accomplished is associated with your name. What did he give his life of? He gave his life for the ark. The ark, Nachmanides says, the ark is the main desire which God had by building the Mishkan. Because the ark is with the presence of God came and dwelled. And this is exactly continuing the legacy of his grandfather Hur. What was the sin of the golden calf? If you analyze it for a second. The whole idea of the golden calf is to say, God forbid, that God is not in our midst. Creating a calf and say, this is my God. Where is the God that you knew till now? He disappeared. What?
Wasn't it supposed to replace Moshe?
Right, but they also said, Eile Elokecha Israel, this is our God. Yeah, that's what they said. Eile Elokecha Israel, this is our God, this is the God of Israel, in Parsha's Kisis. So the whole idea of the sin of the golden calf is kind of rejecting the presence of God in this world. And what is the Mishkan in the other end? Exactly the opposite. What is the purpose of the Mishkan? What is the idea of the Mishkan? Ve'asuli migdash ve'shachanti betocham. The whole idea of the Mishkan is to cause God's presence to dwell, to be channeled in our midst, to identify with, be a part of our reality. This is what the Mishkan is all about. So in a sense, Betzalel is coming and rectifying that which was caused by the generation who killed his own grandfather. Is the tikkun for their sin. A matter of fact, it has to be that God forgave. That's one of the proofs that's brought down in the holy books. One of the proofs that God forgave the Jews for the sin of the golden calf is the very fact that Betzalel was chosen to build the Mishkan. What's the logic? Because usually we have a concept of ein kategor na'asa sanegor. A prosecutor cannot serve as a defender. In one end, Betzalel, representing his grandfather, serves as a prosecutor against the Jewish people. you are the ones who killed my father because you worship the golden calf and he demonstrated against you. So the building of the Mishkan of Betzalel makes a statement. This Mishkan stands openly as a conviction against the Jewish people. Because anytime you ask who made it, Betzalel. Which Betzalel? The guy we killed. Why we killed him? Because we worshipped a golden calf. What kind of Mishkan is it going to be that every time a Jew passes by, it's only going to remind them how badly he behaved before? That's not right. That's not how you build a Mishkan. I believe the Rebbe said it. The Rebbe says, so the fact that they did use Betzalel as the chief engineer and the chief architect only shows us that God really forgave them the sin of the golden calf. And as he forgave them, therefore he was able to use Betzalel because there's no more consideration of sin. Matter of fact, Rashi brings in the Medrash also that the biggest statement and the sign that God forgave the Jews for the golden calf is the fact that Betzalel, the fact that he asked to build a Mishkan. So the building of the Mishkan is the sign that sins were forgiven. But here we're coming to another novelty in regarding to the Mishkan. Together with this great Betzalel, tribe of Yehuda, filled with the spirit of divinity, God tells them, I want you to add another individual young man to work alongside with you, and his name is Eliav ben Achisamach. There were other wise men, but these two are mentioned by name. And why are these two mentioned by name? Says Rashi, chapter 25, says Rashi, that Eliav came from the tribe of Dan. Dan versus Yehuda is the opposite side of the tribes, meaning Yehuda was the leader of the tribes. Yehuda was the king. Yehuda was the one leading them through the desert. He was the first one in the traveling. In the other end, Dan came from the maids of Leah, and he was all the way in the back. The last tribe was the tribe of Dan. They were the so-called the Nebuch tribe. They weren't from there. Definitely very far from a Yehudahite. And yet, God says, quoting the verse, Lo nikar shua lifnei dal, not to extinguish, not to give recognition to the rich over the poor. God says, I don't want just a Yehudahite to be involved in leading this project. I want simultaneously that Betzalel should be joined with a member of the tribe of Dan. Yes, he has to be a craftsman. I'm not just going to take any schlepper because he's from the tribe of Dan. And he was a craftsman by nature. It doesn't say that he was granted special wisdom. Matter of fact, we find later in Tanakh, generations later, descendants of Eliav also serving as craftsmen, as umanim. But God says, as Rashi says, I want you specifically to also use Dan. I want you to use Dan too. The Rebbe once explained the importance of joining Dan with Betzalel is because after all, you're building a Mishkan. And the Mishkan is a Mishkan which is representing the entire Jewish people. And everybody gave for the Mishkan. Everybody gave. And this is sometimes the dilemma. You have people giving. Happens to be that for somebody, he's in the ability to give a considerate, an X amount of gold because they can afford more. God blessed them with special blessings and luck, and they have more. Somebody can give $1,800, for another person $180, for a third person $18. Relatively to their abilities, they might quality-wise serve as the same donors, but yet the quantity is obviously different. And when you create a wall of donors and you give recognition to the one who gave more than the one who gave less, and sometimes you can wonder, so how's it going to end up being? Because after all, I gave, you gave, happens to be you have more, so you gave more. Why am I going to be mentioned forever as the one who gave less? The answer is, as far as giving, God obviously considers the one who gave more and he gave less. As long as you gave it sincerely, full-heartedly, you're on the same page. You have nothing to worry about. But at the same time, it has to also be taken care of physically. So God tells Moshe, even though when it came to the donations, maybe some gave more, some gave less, but when it comes to the actual activity in the work of the Mishkan, at this point, I want Dan and Yehuda to both serve as workers, so everybody knows that as far as work is concerned, you were all equally included in the service. Yes, you didn't give more, so you didn't have more, and it's okay. But when it comes to work and creating it, it has to be a statement somehow that everybody was given equal responsibility. Betzalel and Dan. And that's what we have them both mentioned. And I guess in any fact, you build a Mishkan, you can't just have a Mishkan built by Yehudahites. To build a Mishkan, you have to have people who give instructions and people who receive instructions. You have to have the Donites and the Yehudahites, the important people and the least important people. Everyone contributes to the making of the Mishkan. Remember when Hashem came to give the Torah? What was the condition? Vayichan Sham Yisrael keish echad belev echad. God says, when I see you camping against the mountain as one people, one heart, now I know that you are candidates to receive the Torah. And the same thing is with the Mishkan. To build a Mishkan properly, you must have a mix of what's it called, of Yehuda, and at the same time of Betzalel. Everybody has to be a partner. You have to include them both. Whatever Kabbalistically each one represents. One is the right, one is the left, one is a her, one is a in. Bottom line is they are all mentioned equally in the order of making work. Just to finish up, there's an interesting statement in the Jerusalem Talmud. The Talmud says every single day a Jew davens Shmona Esrei, the Amida. The 18 blessings of Amida corresponds to the 18 times which the word Ka'asher Tziva, as I had commanded, is mentioned in the Parsha of Vayakhel-Pekudei. If you're going to count up, every time it says that he did, and Moses did, Ka'asher Tziva, like he was commanded, you're going to find that it's written 18 times. And this is corresponding to the 18 blessings of Amida. That's what the Talmud says. The Talmud immediately asks, really, if you count them up, it's mentioned 19 times, not 18. So it happens to be that today's Amida is already 19, but in the times of the Talmud, it was only 18. But what the Gemara says is that we are only counting the word Kasher Tziva when it's written to that which was done by Betzalel and Eliyav together. That kasher tziva, which is written only of the work that Bezalel alone did, this is not counted. The obvious question, what does Amida have to do with the Mishkan, kasher tziva? Why is it only mentioned when Eliav's name is mentioned? So, I mean, obviously, you understand that there's a very strong connection between the Mishkan and prayer. The whole idea of the Mishkan was to take physical, worldly materials and elevate them to a point where they can serve God. And that's what prayer is all about. Prayer is elevating the person, elevating his body, elevating his higher faculties, his lower faculties, everything to be a part in elevation and connecting to God. And when it comes to prayer, it's important to remember if you want to have a successful prayer, you cannot just be Betzalel. You must join in with Eliyav too. You know that according to the Kabbalah, in all the Hasidic prayer books, before we start praying in the morning, we make a declaration. Areini mekabel alai mitzvat asay shel ve'ahavta v'reyacha kamoch. I take upon myself the mitzvah to love a single Jew. This is what we do every time that we go to daven. We specifically mention that we are including ourselves with others. It's not only Betzalel, it's only also Eliyav. What is loving a fellow Jew? Loving a fellow Jew, the Baal Shem Tov says, it's even a Jew you never met. Even the Eliyav type of Jew. Everybody's included. And obviously, every person has the Betzalel of himself, the part that is blessed with godly inspiration. And you have the lower part of you called the Eliyav, the Don part. And to build a Mishkan properly to Hashem, you have to have Betzalel and Eliyav together. And that's what the Talmud says, that the Amida prayer corresponds to the word Kasher Tziva, mentioned 18 times, where Betzalel and Eliyav together are performing their work in the Mishkan. So with this, we are concluding tonight's shiur, that we were given some insight, first of all, into understand the special individuals who were involved in the Mishkan. It was to see Betzalel. Betzalel was the phenomenon of enabling to serve gold with gold and silver and copper even after the enslavement in Egypt. It was the book of Adam which had his name. It was the declaration that he's the one in charge. And at the same time, you also learned that even Betzalel had to be joined with Eliyav from the simple tribes. And the reason Betzalel succeeded in his service was mainly because he came from an illustrious Zaidi and Bobby, who they personified the concept of Mesirus Nefesh, self-sacrifice. You know, they say, they have a discussion. What was the first craftsman, the first job from creation? Who was created first? So the doctor says that the surgeon was created first, because how else was Chava created without surgery? So it must be that the first one in creation was a surgeon. And the architects, they claim that they were first, because how else would you have Gan Eden and a world of creation without an architect? So the architects came before the doctors, before the surgeons. The lawyers, they say that they were first. How comes? Because it says that before the world was created, there was chaos. Who else made chaos if not us lawyers? Anyway, this is the end of the class. Hashem should help us to see the Mishkan being built, very soon the Beis Hamikdash, B'Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. To be a good Chodesh for everybody this coming month, Rosh Nisan, month of Pesach. Please, everybody, those who hear us on Zoom, hopefully you want to join us our Seder. Make sure to register. Places are filling up. We're looking forward again for a beautiful first Seder here at ETC, as always. Thank you, V'Laila Tov. You want to unmute yourself and share some of your wisdom? We'd love to. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Actually, you know what? I might take a ride with you. You have a place in your car. You'll drive me home. I came without my car. Anybody else? Everybody okay there?
Very good.
Arnold. Mode'ani lefanecha. You say Mode'ani? Arnold, I don't hear you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody else okay? I
Very
don't
good.
hear you. Illinois, everything okay there by you guys?
Very good. Thank you.
Doesn't snow, it doesn't rain?
No, it was actually rather mild today. Tomorrow it's going to be miserable again, rain and high winds.
Okay, at least you know that Illinois was not moved from its place.
Are you
Soon.
going to share the recording? Are you going to share the recording?
Which recording?
It says that the session is being recorded. This
I'm going
session.
to share it. There's somebody who puts it on the community chat. You want to receive it?
I joined a little bit late, and yes, I wanted to hear the first part.
Give me your phone number. What's your phone number?
425, I will write it also in the chat. 425-985-0958.
1 second, I have to write it down. 985.
985-0958. I just put it in the chat. 425-985-0958.
0958. How do you spell your last name?
I-A-R-O-V-I-C-H. Yarovich.
Okay, I hope I will remember that.
425-985-0958.
Let's see, how do I do it here? Oh, Nathan
Yarovich.
Yarovich.
I don't hear you. Your audio has turned off. We don't hear you. The audio has turned off for the rabbi. We don't hear you. For some reason, we don't hear you.
How do you?
Now, yes, we hear you. Now we hear you. Oh, he disconnected.
All right. Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.